Hi, today I'm going to talk about a few ways that descriptive statistics are applied or actually used in research. And I'm going to take a look at 4 papers which I've also uploaded for you and will be available if you want to take a look at them further. I'm Trina Kilty, by the way, and I am we're I'll be doing a couple of mini lectures during this class as part of my internship for my quantitative minor in education research. So, nice to meet you all before we get started. So let's get started. I pulled out 4 articles altogether. The first one is, I have it up here on the screen, selected statistics from the Public Elementary and Secondary Education Universe in the school year 2014 to 15. This publication from the United States Department of Education, it provides statistics for public elementary and secondary schools. In this first article, I would like to talk about the following points. First of all, looking through this paper, a government report is arranged a little differently than a peer-reviewed manuscript in a journal. There's no abstract or literature review. The introduction, as we get to it down here, there's a lot of pages left blank, is a mere page long. And then it's followed by results in table form. As you look through the table of contents here, you can see that. The tables are on page 5. The methodology is listed as an appendix. And then there's quite an extensive glossary of terms. And those are all things that generally differ a little bit from your typical academic paper. In the tables section, the authors basically write what these reports includes for statistics that they describe, and that is listed then here as well in the introduction in written form. It's the numbers and types of public elementary and secondary schools and local education agencies, their operational status, the membership counts of students, teachers, and the student-teacher ratios. And then selected findings here are kind of everything, almost what you might think of if you have experience with an executive summary. That's what that looks like kind of to me. And then they have their references, and then we'll get into the tables. The tables, as you can see here, show exclusively numerical data. So in other words, it's a count. It's counts. They've counted the number of schools that fit into the characteristics that I mentioned above. And if you remember back in the introduction, the authors did actually specify that they were counts. So as you look through here, more counts by state. And the purpose for including this study, why I included it and decided to show it to you, was just to give you an example of how in the traditional sense, even though this paper does not maybe follow an academic kind of schedule of providing some implications and recommendations, a literature review, a method section, and really the quantitative part is quite minor. I mean, it's a count, it's most likely this is probably still a pretty powerful paper because so many people need to cite this to provide descriptive statistics as part of their own background for their own studies. So example, if you were going to study Wyoming down here, you'd probably want to cite this paper because you'd want to cite these statistics. They would help you form a better description of your own population or your own study for your own research. So there's real value to presenting a paper and writing up a paper such as this, even though as you look at it, it's fairly simplistic in that it's a short paper and it's counts. It's just simply counting things. You don't even need Excel probably for this, although it probably helped them organize. Now the next paper I want to look at is, this is by Reardon, Kellegrides, and Ho about mapping a U.S. school district score distributions. This was prepared for a conference presentation, so it's brief and condensed. The full paper is published elsewhere. Um, excuse me. This paper is meant more as an extended abstract. So as you look at it, it also does not have all the, it does, but it's actually in very condensed form. Things like background, introduction, method, data analysis, and so forth. The author's purpose, was to map district test score means and standard deviations onto a common metric across states and evaluate the accuracy of mapping. And that's from page 1. That's an actual quote in here. And what I'd like to say is basically that this sample is, as you look at this, and there's the purpose. So there it is, as what I wrote, their goal. And so you can see how condensed this is. This is just a mere sentence here. Now the research setting is elementary school, and the population consists of all U.S. public school students in grades 3 through 8 from 2008 to 2013. So in this case, this is one example where the researchers actually studied something that resembles a population much more than a sample. Typically in a study that you might do, unless you have access to this kind of data, you study a sample or a portion of the population. And from what they state here, it looks like they sampled the entire population of all kids in, as they say, U.S. public schools. The researchers used standard test score means and standard deviations, and that's right here, means and standard deviations. So they moved them to a common scale, and then they gathered reliability statistics. And reliability, of course, as you've learned, is a measure of consistency. Statistics from state test score manuals for means and standard deviations. That produced state means and standard errors. So they're sort of standardizing all of these test scores so that they are able to compare them against each other. They also used 3 tests for validity, and there's an awful lot of equations in here. The nice part about a lot of these is that you can get programs that will do that for you, but they do want to show you the thought process behind how they got these different measures of validity. They used the root mean square method, and that's in here. That's this paragraph, root mean square error. I might have said method, sorry. I meant error, RMSE, to account for the discrepancies between means and standard deviations. They also did another validity test, and validity, as you remember, is accuracy. They compared the means and standard deviations with estimations. And finally, they evaluated and adjusted for alignment between a standardized test score, or a z-score, and the linked estimated means and standard deviations. So they did find, as we work on down through here into the findings and results, they did find evidence of bias, and they speculated on some of the reasons. They talk in here about there was a cheating scandal, maybe some of the reasons for the bias and differences or motivation differences of the students, and so forth. They did find correlations between estimated means and actual means. And then the references, along with the actual tables and figures of data, are in the appendices, which is pretty uncommon, not unheard of, for an extended abstract submitted for a conference. And Appendix B1 shows correlation bias, root mean squared error, along the different estimations. So here's the grade here, and there's the correlation score, a bias, and an RMSE right here. Now the next one, B2, is what I wanted to show you. This is a scatter plot of mean test scores for math and English language for grades 4 through 8, or 4 and 8, sorry, for the reported scores and actual scores. The scatter plot, as you look forms a really excellent best fit line of regression here. These line up as good as I've ever seen it to a straight line regression. And so the purpose for me including this study was to illustrate how quote unquote simple means and standard deviations, something that you're looking at for your assignments. And you can plot that as a simple, again, quote unquote, scatter plot. Another thing that you may do for your assignments, it may yield powerful and useful information. This visual analysis of the scatter plot shows a really clear relationship between the two variables and an obvious best fit line drawn along them. Visual representations such as these could form the basis of some pretty powerful arguments, supporting or rejecting district assessments or some other construct that is the subject of your paper. So let's turn now to another study by Yurtseven and Badamchiglo on teachers' professional development content analysis of studies. This has the following points that I'd like to cover. The purpose of this study was to conduct a content analysis on studies of teachers' professional development and to describe characteristics of those studies using descriptive statistics. So content analysis, just a couple of really quick vocabulary explanations, it's a type of qualitative research, and it involves analyzing text according to your research question. And that's mentioned here in the abstract that they use that. Coding, which is another, it's kind of a way to get at, or a way you go about doing content analysis. That's used in qualitative research, and it involves categorizing words, phrases, even entire sentences into categories or codes, which combine into a bigger construct called a theme. A study may yield only one or two or several themes, although from experience, the higher number of themes you get, the more subtle the differences are between them. It's kind of both an art and a science to develop kind of the right number of themes. And there's not really any easy answers to it or simple formulas. The researchers also use the term variables in here, or keywords and key phrases to help them classify or code. In their words, using their words, these variables were publication type, publication language, the year, the field of research, research design, data collection tools, data analysis, the number of analyses, participant types, number of participants, average participant size, areas of study, findings, and recommendations. So kind of all the elements of a typical paper they went through and classified or coded for. The descriptive statistics includes words like frequency and percentages, and they're written up in a descriptive way. So the study is overall a good example, I think, of how descriptive statistics are used to formulate and support arguments in an overall qualitative study. So it kind of speaks to a misconception that if you have a qualitative study, you have no numbers whatsoever. Not true. You generally don't go into very sophisticated quantitative statistical analysis, but if you'll use numbers, and generally those will be descriptive statistics. So moving down, the study follows the general form, the academic paper form of abstract, introduction, a statement of the research questions. They had 14 research questions, which is a lot, but they used SPSS, which is a statistical program, to analyze each of their questions. So it's feasible, or at least it looks like it was feasible in a single study. It's a lot of research questions, but it looks like they managed to get that accomplished. In the methods section here, the researchers chose 60 studies at random and used a shared Google Drive to organize all the data. They went through and coded or classified, finding 13 themes ranging from data collection tools to recommendations. The researchers, in order to ensure reliability and validity, which remember is consistency and accuracy, redid their work, and they also asked for 2 expert opinions of leaders in the educational field, something that's quite common to do in qualitative analysis. The findings here are often called findings in qualitative research, and it's often called results in quantitative research. They're presented visually. There we go. Research questions 1 through 12, so there's going to be a lot of these, were presented as bar charts. So I'll just show an example of a bar chart. And basically illustrate a theme and the frequency of times that it appears in the studies. As you can see. So as we go through here, the language, all of these different things, and it gives you a quick visual, and I think this visual display of information is helpful in looking at a glance rather than using it or writing it up in text form, which I think they also did, but these visual displays really give you a sense, for example, what the big ones were, what the ones that maybe didn't show up as much. Okay, so this is research questions 1 through 12, remember, so there's a lot of these. And they're all bar charts. They're separated from each other. If they did not have that separation, they would be a histogram. Okay, and then they used a stem and leaf diagram to answer or display the results of the research questions 13 and 14. This is research question 13 here. The stem and leaf charts are all the codes, constructs, or themes are arranged vertically right here, and then the number of times or the frequency that it shows up is arranged horizontally. So the longer the line, the more frequently it shows up. Basically, the higher frequency of the idea in the various studies. And then here is the last research question. Now the purpose for including this study in this mini lecture was to show you basically an example of how descriptive statistics is used in qualitative inquiry to fully explain and support the researcher's findings. Qualitative research, it basically doesn't mean the absence of numbers, but rather numbers play a smaller role than words in answering the research questions. And another thing is that this visual display kind of helps bridge that divide. So people who are just not numbers people can still look at these visual displays and get the gist of what this study is trying to say. In descriptive statistics, bar charts, histograms, stem and leaf diagrams, all the things that you're learning about are really good ways to display that data. Now the final article, I'll scroll back up here, by Firat, Sakar, and Yurkadal on design principles for adult self-directed learning, covers the following points here. I will scroll down so that we can look at this. In this study, the authors compared literature against 12 subject matter experts and to determine common principles or themes for designing for adult self-directed learning. The study contains an abstract and an introduction that includes a definition of self-directed learning. That is the first kind of construct or concept that they wanted to talk about, and it includes a figure to explain the concept more fully. So this is a form of visual representation of data in some ways, and that they use this to kind of give you kind of a concept map or a mind map of it, as well as describing it through words. And then they did this as well for adult education, the other concept that they were interested in researching. And there that is andragogy, or adult learning, and then all the different characteristics that could be taken into account. And these two figures, I think, illustrate ways of thinking about concepts. They're a visual representation. They're supported by data, but they don't necessarily include numerical information. It's more of a relationship of the concepts. These are pretty common in qualitative inquiry. This was a qualitative study, and I think another example of how descriptive statistics may still be necessary to fully describe the participants or the findings or validate a new model of thinking. But incorporating descriptive statistics does not a quantitative study make, or even a mixed method study. So don't, I guess, if you want to go in a qualitative direction, don't worry about throwing in some descriptive statistics and saying, oh, that makes it mixed methods or that makes it quantitative. It doesn't. The study also contains a literature review, a purpose statement, and clearly stated research questions, which are just right down here, 2 research questions. In the method section, just to use the words of the author, this descriptive study investigated the views and suggestions of experts on interface design principles supporting adult self-directed learning by both qualitative and quantitative data. That may ring bells in your head going, wait, that's a mixed method study, but I really don't think it is. And I'll show you some more of the findings that I think back that up. The quantitative data, what there is of it includes frequency tables. So, for example, this one, the table of participant demographics and the frequency of that characteristic. That is, again, kind of a count. So I don't think that does not put it into the quantitative side or even into the mixed method side. The qualitative data included a table of the main themes or design principles found in the literature. This is much more indicative of a qualitative study, where you have the themes or the codes or the ideas on this side and some of the evidence or support backing that theme that they found, in this case in the literature review. Now in the data analysis section, using the words of the authors again, data obtained from the first section of the expert opinion form were analyzed through descriptive statistics. The authors examined the strength and direction of experts' attitudes towards the design principles from the literature. And the authors used content analysis, that's that term again, and thematic analysis, both qualitative methods, to determine if the principles supported self-directed learning. Table 4, here into the findings section, presents the results of the experts rating the importance of design principles on a scale from 1 to 10. The overall total, or the sum of all the scores, is what that total is. And then they listed the mean, and they used average, which it's not really average. A better quantitative term would have been mean, and they probably should have included a standard deviation as well, but that's what they included. Table 5 is very qualitative. The results of thematic analysis used to analyze a participant's answers to an open-ended question. So on that, where you can't really get a lot of frequencies or means or standard deviations from an open-ended. And then representative quotes, very common for qualitative data. And then arrange, that's basically those quotes support that theme that they found. And then table 6 kind of puts it all together. And it's in the discussion conclusion section, and it sums up, so to speak, the whole purpose for the study and how they answered those research questions. It's a side-by-side comparison of what experts rated as important alongside design principles gleaned from the literature. This table is also a qualitative table. I mean, there's no means or standard deviations or anything else in here other than text. And so to me, this firmly cements this study as qualitative inquiry. But my purpose for choosing this study was to illustrate how frequencies and means may become part of a published study. So you may think that descriptive statistics are very elementary, very simple, but they're used quite often to just fully describe the participants' demographics maybe, or their attitudes, their perceptions, or their values. And they can be quite useful, cited frequently, and valuable. So thank you.